I always thought we had a solid marriage. You know, the kind of relationship where you can trust someone implicitly and feel safe in their love. Sure, Ashley and I had our ups and downs. What couple doesn't after 10 years of marriage? But it wasn't anything I'd consider unusual. She'd been a bit distant lately, but she chalked it up to work stress and needing some personal space. I wanted to be supportive, so when she told me she was planning a weekend trip to visit her old high school friend, Lisa, I didn't hesitate. She said she needed to clear her head. I agreed it might do her some good. Lisa's been going through a tough time, Ashley had explained while packing her overnight bag. And honestly, I could use the break too. I'll be back Sunday evening, okay? I nodded. Of course. Take your time. I even felt a little guilty for being relieved at the thought of having the house to myself for a couple of days. It was rare to have that kind of quiet. But then, something small nagged at me. Not enough to cause alarm, just a faint itch in the back of my mind. It wasn't anything specific. It was how she avoided eye contact while zipping up her bag. The tight-lipped smile she gave when I kissed her goodbye. The way she mentioned the trip so casually, almost rehearsed. I pushed the thoughts away. I trusted her. I had to. The house felt eerily quiet without Ashley. I spent Saturday morning lounging around, catching up on a few chores and binging on TV shows I'd missed. But by the afternoon, I started feeling restless. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe I should do something sweet for her. After all, she'd been stressed, and maybe my support hadn't been enough lately. A grand gesture seemed like the perfect way to show her how much I cared. The idea hit me suddenly. What if I drove up to Lisa's place to surprise her? Ashley always loved romantic gestures, and I figured showing up with flowers and her favorite snacks would earn me some serious husband points. I pulled out my phone and checked the route to Lisa's place. It wasn't far, just a little over an hour's drive. I could be there by dinner, give her the flowers, and maybe even take her and Lisa out for a meal. Ashley would be thrilled. At least, that's what I told myself. I stopped by the florist on my way, choosing a bouquet of yellow lilies and white roses, her favorite. As I drove, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. What if she was having a deep conversation with Lisa and I interrupted? What if she didn't like the surprise? I told myself it didn't matter. She'd appreciate the effort, and that's what counted. I pulled up to Lisa's street just as the sun began to set. It was a cozy neighborhood, lined with modest, cookie-cutter houses. I found Lisa's address, grabbed the flowers, and walked up to the door. I knocked, grinning like an idiot as I imagined Ashley's surprised face. The door opened, but it wasn't Ashley. It wasn't Lisa either. An older woman stood there, her face curious but cautious. "Can I help you?" she asked. I glanced at the house number, then back at her. Sorry, this is Lisa Anderson's house, right?" The woman furrowed her brow. "Anderson? Oh, honey, Lisa moved out years ago. I've been living here since 2018. My stomach dropped. "Are you sure? Lisa Anderson? She's a friend of my wife's. Ashley said she was staying here this weekend." The woman shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I don't know a Lisa Anderson. I think you've got the wrong house." I stood there, the flowers in my hand feeling heavier than they should have. The woman's words echoed in my head, "Lisa moved out years ago." "Thanks," I muttered, forcing a polite smile as I backed away. My mind raced. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe Ashley got the address wrong. Maybe Lisa rented out the house but didn't tell Ashley. Maybe, no. something wasn't adding up. I got back into my car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding, and I hated how my thoughts spiraled into darker territory. I tried calling Ashley. It rang twice before going straight to voicemail. She's probably just busy, I told myself, though the rationalization felt hollow. I tried Lisa's number too. Ashley had given it to me a long time ago, just in case of emergencies. But the number didn't even connect, it was out of service. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I opened my Maps app and searched for restaurants, bars, or any nearby places Ashley might have gone instead. As I scrolled, a nagging thought wormed its way into my brain: what if she isn't with Lisa? I tried to dismiss it, but the evidence, or lack thereof, kept piling up. Lisa wasn't here. Ashley wasn't answering her phone. And for the first time in our marriage, I started to doubt her. I decided to drive back. Maybe I'd find her at home, maybe she'd explain this away as some mix-up, and I'd feel ridiculous for doubting her. But the farther I drove, the less convinced I became. About 20 minutes into my drive back, I spotted a restaurant on the side of the road. It was one of those quaint little places, the kind you'd stop at for a casual dinner. The parking lot was packed, and something made me glance twice. Among the cars, I spotted Ashley's. I pulled into the lot without thinking, my pulse quickening. I parked a few rows away and stared at her car. It was definitely hers, the small scratch on the bumper confirmed it. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Maybe she's just here to grab something to eat, I whispered to myself. But deep down, I knew that didn't make sense. Why wouldn't she mention this? Why wouldn't she answer her phone? I got out of the car, still clutching the flowers, and walked toward the restaurant. My hands were clammy, and my chest felt tight. As I neared the entrance, I peered through the large glass windows, scanning the tables. And then I saw her. Ashley was sitting in a corner booth, her back toward me. She wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man, mid-30s, well-dressed, and leaning in far closer than was appropriate. They were laughing. His hand reached across the table and rested on hers. Time seemed to freeze as I stood outside the restaurant, staring through the window. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. There she was, my wife, the woman I trusted, laughing and holding hands with a man I didn't recognize. I wanted to storm in, demand an explanation, demand answers, but my legs refused to move. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot, watching their every move. Ashley tossed her head back in laughter, that laugh I used to live for, but now it felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. The man leaned closer, saying something that made her blush. She didn't pull away. She didn't even flinch. She looked comfortable. Relaxed. Like she'd done this 100 times before. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. My heart screamed at me to walk away, to give her the benefit of the doubt. But my brain, it demanded clarity. Proof. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I stepped closer to the window, trying to stay out of sight while I studied them. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and shiny. At first, I thought it was a pen, but then he slid it across the table. Ashley picked it up, her fingers brushing his, and examined it. She smiled, then slipped it into her purse. I felt sick. My stomach churned as a million questions raced through my mind. What was he giving her? Was this some kind of twisted gift? A token of their, whatever this was? My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I fumbled to silence it, but the screen lit up with Ashley's name. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, her face smiling up at me from the contact photo I'd taken years ago. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What would I even say? I glanced back through the window, and now she was checking her phone. Her smile faltered, and she said something to the man, who nodded. She stood up, scanning the room as if she was looking for someone. My heart raced. Did she see me? Was she going to lie her way out of this? Before I could decide what to do, she grabbed her purse, kissed the man on the cheek, and started toward the exit. I ducked behind a car in the parking lot, crouching low as the restaurant door swung open. I watched as Ashley stepped outside, the same confident stride she always had. She walked to her car, got in, and drove off, leaving the man behind. For a second, I felt relief. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But then I looked back through the restaurant window, and the man was still sitting there. Alone. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. And then, my phone buzzed again. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling as the screen lit up again with Ashley's name. My mind screamed at me to answer, to confront her, to demand the truth, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I let it go to voicemail and watched as the man inside the restaurant leaned back in his seat, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. My head was spinning. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I needed clarity, but I didn't trust myself to get it by just asking Ashley. No, she'd lie, she already had. She'd told me she was staying with Lisa, and now I knew Lisa wasn't even in the picture. I made a split-second decision. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I was going to find it myself. I hurried back to my car, making sure to keep my distance from the restaurant's windows. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at my phone. I opened our shared location app, a feature we'd both agreed to use years ago, just in case of emergencies. Ashley's location was moving. She was heading toward the highway, probably back home. My jaw clenched as I watched the little dot blink on the screen. I debated following her, but something told me I needed to stay here, to see what the man did next. I waited, my eyes fixed on the restaurant entrance. About 10 minutes later, he walked out, looking completely at ease. He wasn't rushing, wasn't looking around nervously. He strolled to his car, a sleek black sedan, and got in. He didn't drive off immediately, though. Instead, he sat there for a few minutes, tapping away on his phone. Another buzz from mine. This time, it was a text from Ashley. Ashley, hey babe, just checking in. Lisa and I had a great time catching up. Heading back soon. Love you, my blood boiled. The audacity of it. I wanted to throw my phone, to scream, to confront her through the text, but I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and snapped a photo of her text. If she was lying to my face, I needed to gather everything. The man finally started his car, and I made another split-second decision. I followed him. He pulled out of the parking lot, and I stayed a few cars behind, careful not to draw attention. We drove for about 15 minutes until he turned into a residential neighborhood. My palms were slick with sweat as I watched him pull into a driveway and park. He got out, carrying a briefcase and walking toward the house like he didn't have a care in the world. I stayed parked a few houses down, my engine idling as I debated what to do next. Should I confront him? Should I knock on the door and demand answers? My mind raced with possibilities, each more chaotic than the last. But before I could decide, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from our bank. New transaction, $275 at Lux Garden Hotel. The air left my lungs. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message. Ashley wasn't heading home. She wasn't with Lisa. She had just checked into a hotel. The notification from the bank felt like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened as I reread it, my brain struggling to process what I already knew deep down. Ashley had just checked into a hotel. There was no more room for denial or rationalization. Whatever was happening, it wasn't innocent. I sat in my car, parked a few houses down from where the man had disappeared into his home, staring at my phone. I felt like I was trapped in a bad dream. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to do something, anything, but I was frozen. The betrayal was no longer just a suspicion, it was staring me in the face, undeniable. I opened the location app again, confirming her position. Sure enough, the blinking dot had stopped at the Lux Garden Hotel. My hands shook as I imagined her there, waiting for him, or worse, already with him. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to picture it. But the pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. She had lied about Lisa, lied about where she was going, and now she was at a hotel. It wasn't a coincidence. I threw the car into gear and peeled away from the quiet suburban street. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I got to the hotel, but I knew I couldn't stay idle. If she was going to lie to my face, if she was going to disrespect me in our marriage like this, I needed to confront her head-on. It took me less than 20 minutes to reach the Lux Garden Hotel, but it felt like hours. My mind was racing, replaying every moment from the past few months, every interaction with Ashley. The way she'd been distant. The random excuses. The sudden need for a girls' weekend. How had I been so blind? I parked in the lot, trying to steady my breathing as I stared at the sleek, modern building in front of me. The lobby was brightly lit, its glass walls revealing a calm, professional atmosphere inside. I felt anything but calm. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I grabbed my phone and opened the bank app again, pulling up the transaction. The time stamp showed it had been processed just 10 minutes ago. She was still here. I checked the location app one last time, and the dot confirmed it. There was no turning back now. I walked into the lobby, trying to keep my emotions in check. The receptionist glanced up from her desk, smiling politely. "Good evening. How can I help you?" I hesitated, then forced a smile. "Hi, my wife just checked in. I'm supposed to meet her here, but she's not answering her phone. Could you remind me of her room number?" The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. "What's the name on the reservation?" "Ashley Carter." She typed into her computer, her expression neutral. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out room numbers for security reasons. You're welcome to call her from the courtesy phone." I clenched my jaw, trying to hide my frustration. "Thanks," I muttered, stepping aside. I stared at the courtesy phone, debating my next move. Then I spotted the elevators, their doors sliding open as a guest stepped out. Before I could stop myself, I was walking toward them, the adrenaline in my veins drowning out the voice in my head telling me to think this through. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. I didn't even know what I was going to do when I got to her floor, I just knew I needed to see her. To hear whatever excuse she was going to make. To look her in the eye and demand the truth. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the quiet hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I checked the location app again. Her dot was stationary. I followed it down the hall, my heart hammering with every step. Room 314. I stood outside the door, my fists clenched at my sides. The flowers I'd brought earlier were still sitting in my car, forgotten. My entire world was on the other side of this door, and I had no idea what I was about to find. I knocked. The knock echoed down the quiet hallway, a hollow, accusing sound. My heart pounded as I stood there, waiting. My mind raced with every possible scenario. Would she open the door alone and try to explain? Would he answer? I didn't know if I was prepared for either outcome. I heard footsteps inside, light and hesitant, followed by the sound of the lock clicking. The door opened just a crack, and there she was, Ashley. She froze when she saw me, her expression shifting from surprise to panic in a heartbeat. "Mark?" Her voice was shaky, her hand tightening on the edge of the door. "What are you doing here?" I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I could feel my blood boiling, my pulse roaring in my ears. "What am I doing here?" I finally managed, my voice low and trembling. "What are you doing here, Ashley?" "With him." Her face went pale. She stepped out into the hallway, quickly pulling the door shut behind her. "Mark, this isn't what it looks like," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Really?" I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. "Because it sure looks like you've been lying to me all weekend. Lisa doesn't live at that address anymore, Ashley. I went there. And now I find you at a hotel? After dinner with some guy?" My voice cracked with emotion, and I could feel tears threatening to well up. "How long has this been going on?" She flinched, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. "It's not. It's complicated, okay? I can explain." "Then explain," I demanded. "Because right now, all I see is my wife sneaking off to a hotel with another man." The door behind her opened slightly, and a man's voice called out. "Ashley? Is everything okay?" My heart sank. I recognized his voice immediately, the man from the restaurant. She turned, her face a mixture of fear and guilt, as he stepped into the hallway. He was tall, confident, and completely unapologetic as he looked at me. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. He shrugged, his tone casual, almost smug. "I'm Eric. And, well, I guess you could say I'm a friend of Ashley's." "A friend?" I laughed bitterly. "Do all of her friends meet her at hotels and hold her hand over dinner?" "Mark, please," Ashley pleaded, stepping between us. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Find out?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "So it's true, then. You've been cheating on me." Ashley's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she straightened, her expression hardening. "Mark, it's not that simple. You've been so distant lately. Always working. Always too busy to notice what's going on with me." I stared at her in disbelief. "So this is my fault now? You lied to me, Ashley. You cheated. Don't you dare try to make this about me." Eric cleared his throat, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Look, man, maybe you should leave. This is between me and Ashley." That was it. The final straw. I took a step forward, my anger surging, but Ashley grabbed my arm. "Mark, don't," she begged. "Please. Let's just talk about this. Alone." I shook her off, my voice cold and firm. "There's nothing left to talk about. I trusted you, Ashley. And you destroyed it." I turned and walked away, ignoring her desperate calls behind me. My vision blurred with tears, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. My world had just shattered, and there was no piecing it back together. I don't remember much about the drive home. The streets blurred together, the city lights smearing across my windshield like a bad dream. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my mind racing with every word Ashley had said, every moment I had seen in that hotel hallway. She didn't even deny it. She tried to blame me. Blame me, for working long hours, for trusting her, for not noticing what was happening. The audacity of it made my stomach turn. When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked different. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt hollow, a facade for a life that no longer existed. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door, trying to summon the courage to go inside. Everything inside those walls was a reminder of what I thought we had, and now it all felt like a lie. When I finally went in, the silence was deafening. The house was cold, empty, and unfamiliar. I dropped my keys on the counter and slumped onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. The events of the night replayed in my head like a bad movie, each memory more painful than the last. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, numb, as the weight of everything pressed down on me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, had betrayed me. And now, I didn't even know who I was without her. As the hours dragged on, my mind wandered back to the beginning. I thought about all the little moments over the past few months, the ones that hadn't seemed significant at the time but now felt glaringly obvious. The way Ashley had started keeping her phone close, even taking it to the bathroom. The sudden nights out with friends I didn't know well. The new clothes, the extra care with her appearance, the way she smiled at her screen when she thought I wasn't looking. And the distance. The way she'd pull away when I tried to kiss her, the excuses she'd make when I wanted to spend time together. I had blamed it on stress, on life, on anything but what it really was. I had convinced myself that our love was strong enough to weather anything. But I was wrong. I couldn't sit there forever. The weight of the betrayal crushed me, but I knew I had to act. I had to take control of the situation before it consumed me. I grabbed my phone and opened the texts from Ashley. Her last message, heading back soon. Love you, mocked me with its lies. I replied, my fingers trembling, don't bother coming home tonight. We'll talk tomorrow when I've had time to think. I hit send and threw my phone onto the coffee table. The thought of facing her, of listening to her try to justify what she'd done, made my stomach churn. But I needed answers. I needed to know why. Why she did it. Why she lied. Why she had thrown away everything we had built together. And then I needed to figure out what came next. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ashley's face, not the Ashley I thought I knew, but the one standing in that hotel hallway, caught in her lies. I kept checking my phone, half expecting her to respond to my message, to plead her case, to apologize. But the screen stayed dark, as silent as the house around me. The silence was unbearable. I couldn't sit still, couldn't stop replaying everything over and over in my mind. I paced the living room, the echoes of my footsteps the only sound. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger, a cruel reminder of vows that had been broken. Around 3 a.m., the exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. I sank onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, my body too tired to move but my mind still racing. How could this have happened? What did this mean for us? For me? The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, harsh and uninviting. My body ached from the tension, my head pounding from the restless night. I checked my phone again, still nothing from Ashley. The realization stung, but it also solidified something inside me. I couldn't keep waiting for her to make this right. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I started making a list of what needed to be done. Practical things. Logistical things. Bank accounts, shared bills, legal documents. The kind of things you never think about until you're forced to face them. It felt mechanical, but it gave me a sense of control, something I desperately needed. Around 10 a.m., Ashley's car pulled into the driveway. My stomach tightened as I heard the sound of her key in the lock. The door opened, and there she was, looking tired but otherwise composed. She had the nerve to look surprised when she saw me sitting on the couch, as if she expected me to be gone. "Mark," she started, her voice soft, almost cautious. "Can we talk?" I stood, crossing my arms over my chest. "Talk," I said flatly. My tone surprised even me, cold, detached. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something worse. Empty. She hesitated, then sighed, closing the door behind her. "Look, I know you're upset. But you have to understand." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the room. "Don't try to explain it away. Don't try to justify it. I know what I saw, Ashley." Her eyes darted to the floor, and for a moment, I thought I saw guilt flash across her face. But when she looked back at me, there was something else, defiance. "Mark, I wasn't happy," she said, her voice trembling. "You've been so distant, so consumed with work." I felt alone. I laughed bitterly. "So instead of talking to me, instead of working through it like adults, you decided to sneak around with some guy? You decided to lie to my face?" "It wasn't like that," she snapped, her tone defensive now. "Eric, he listened to me. He made me feel seen." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "Do you even hear yourself? Do you realize what you've done?" She didn't respond. She just stood there, arms wrapped around herself, looking small and unsure. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of the love I used to feel for her, the part of me that wanted to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But that part was quickly smothered by the overwhelming weight of her betrayal. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Ashley," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I can't do this. You lied to me. You cheated. And now you're trying to justify it. There's no coming back from that." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Mark, please, don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Eric. I'll do whatever it takes." But it was too late. Her words felt hollow, meaningless. "You already made your choice," I said. "And now I'm making mine. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then her shoulders slumped, and she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "If that's what you want," she whispered. "It's what I need," I replied. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and difficult conversations. I told my close friends and family what had happened, and their support became a lifeline. Ashley moved out, and the house felt emptier than ever, but in a strange way, it also felt lighter. Like I could finally breathe again. It wasn't easy. There were days when the pain felt unbearable, when the weight of the betrayal threatened to crush me. But slowly, I began to rebuild. I focused on myself, on my future, on learning how to trust again, starting with trusting myself. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that love isn't enough. It takes honesty, communication, and respect. And when those things are gone, no amount of history or promises can hold a relationship together. To anyone reading this who's been through something similar, you'll survive this. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But one day, you'll wake up and realize that the person who hurt you doesn't control your life anymore. And that's the day you'll truly be free.